Pastor Dias said you guys taking a test tonight. Is that it? No, that's not the case. I thought you were supposed to have a test on History 1, or we're going to review. Review. All right, you're not. Okay. So you run a little bit behind on that. Okay. All right. So in that case, we'll review. Let's pray and get started. We've stumbled around trying to get all the equipment working, so it's a little bit different. I made a file this afternoon for the review, and it took me 20 minutes to find it. And it was hiding on the computer there somewhere. So, Holy One of Israel, Mighty One of Jacob, thank you, Lord, for the blessing to be able to come together and freely just consider your scriptures, your revelation, your word. We pray that as we do so tonight, that you would stir and quicken us by your Holy Spirit, that we may understand and be available to become more and more fruitful in this awesome day that you've called us. We thank you that we are the generation that have seen all these prophetic fulfillments and somehow have been a participant in them. So anoint us and cause us to understand and bless our time together, we pray. We thank you for the favor you've granted us in Jesus. We thank you, Lord. Amen, amen. People got news from the folks in the land? I see. Well, it's about 3 o'clock in the morning there, I guess. They're just hopefully getting a little sleep, I guess. Have they gone to Jerusalem already? Man, it didn't take long to tour the Galilee, did it? Man, they must have driven up there, circled the Yom Kinneret and come home or something. I don't know. That's fast. It's Joe and I were talking about today. It's hard for me to fathom trying to put together a work tour and a tour together. Both are important, really important, and so I know from a financial standpoint, it's advantageous to try to put them together. But I always took 2 weeks to tour, and just felt like I was hitting the very barest high points. I mean, you know. A few years ago, Joe and I went with the work group, and after the work group took off on their short tour, we just went back to Jerusalem and spent the week in Jerusalem then, and that was really enjoyable, and we had plenty of time. And our hotel, you know, the tram that they've got running through the town now, I didn't know it when I scheduled the hotel room. But it ended up all we did. We walked out of the hotel, walked across the street, and got on the thing, went wherever we wanted to. It was really great. And hotel. I reserved the hotel room, and they told us what was in the room. Actually, there's more stuff in the room than they told us. But anyway, they said they had electric kettle, and so I had to call them. I said, I don't know what an electric kettle is. It's a coffee pot. Electric kettle, they call it. So anyway, language takes a beating sometimes.
The hotel we're staying in printed off the cover sheet. It's all the amenities. Mm-hmm. One of the things on it is glass toilet paper.
Well, in Israel, that's I don't know if that's an issue, but 40 years ago, we used to take our own toilet paper when we went to Israel. You could get Israel toilet paper, but you didn't want to use it. So we'd take a couple of rolls with us, and it's handy. So anyway, so we're going to, you guys already got your notebook material for History 2, for the Kings. So how come he hadn't given you a test in History 1 already? I didn't know. So he's waiting to do that, I guess, when he gets back. So, all right, okay. I always love to give tests. I like to do that. I don't like to grade them, but all right. We're going to spend a few minutes looking at review, and I want to. I always want to try to get things in a big picture. So, if I write on the chalkboard, can we see it? Let me move it a little bit. I could use that board, but I don't like to use those things. All right, I like to look at the broader picture of redemption, and so I will look at if I spelt it right, a patriarchal age. I'm talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob down to Moses. All right? So everybody's following. And so date-wise, we're talking about something like 2000 to, I'll say, 1447 BCE. And so in our book, then, we have basically the Genesis account in that period. And then we have what I like to call the first kingdom age, or early kingdom age. That's a good way to talk about it too, which would date from 1447 to 586 BCE. And so you've studied through basically half of that period now with the judges. That early kingdom age is basically divided in two 400-year periods, roughly, from 1447 down to about 1,000, from 1,000 down to 586, roughly in those divisions. And so we have the period of the judges and the kings, which you're getting ready to study. So you studied the first half of this, and we're getting ready to study the second half. All right? And then you have the period of what I will call the nations, and we would go 586. I'm getting too close to the bottom. BCE. And it would be questionable what the other date of this, but I'm going to just put 29 CE AD or 1967 CE AD. So in Luke 20, if someone got Luke 21:24, you could flip to real quick. Jesus is talking about what is about to happen to Jerusalem in his day. And he says Jerusalem is going to be trampled down by the nations, by the Gentiles, for a period of time. Someone got that?
And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the time the Gentiles are fulfilled.
Okay, so in our days, then, at the latest, we would say that time Jerusalem came under sovereign Israeli control in the 6-day war. The old city of Jerusalem did, the biblical city of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. Of course, there was West Jerusalem that was already under Israeli control, but and I think prophecy-wise, we're always going to be centered on the Temple Mount and talking about that. So hence the date that I put, 1967. Now, how many of us have become, how many of us have become believers since that time, since 1967? Everybody here? Everybody here. Joe and I came to know the Lord, what year were we talking about? 1972, I guess? I think 1972. So there was a and And I feel very much in response to that. Not people didn't necessarily put the two together, but I think in the spiritual realm, the two are related. And so I think the period of the nations. And now, when Jesus is talking about the period of the nations, he was talking about the focus of God's purpose being reaching out toward the nations, and then that ultimately coming to an end, and that is coming to the end with the ingathering of Israel to the land. And so the focus once again then is upon Israel and the land. And hence, and I don't have room here, so can I turn this? How's that? Tricky, huh? I'll put it in caps. Gosh, what am I writing? New Kingdom Age. And you can put, if we want to just for continuity's sake, put 1967 into the future. The New Kingdom Age, we believe, won't truly be fully manifested until Jesus comes. At his descent, that kingdom we believe to be established in Jerusalem, but what we're seeing now is the lead up to that, the preparation for that. So I believe that the early kingdom age, it foreshadows the new kingdom age that's coming. And yeah.
The kingdom age is the kingdom that is established when Jesus gets here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what? Just for sake of talking for a moment, what do we expect that to look like? I mean, now I understand that we have, from a prophecy standpoint, just a barest picture of what that may look like. So we're speculating for sure. But honestly, what do we expect that to look like? Order? How come there be? How would there be order? So you think he might go and jerk things around a little bit?
Well, he's the Holy Spirit walking the land. I mean, he's so full of that whatever he says happens.
Okay. So he.
From what we read here.
So Isaiah prophesied and Paul repeated that every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord to the glory of God. How do you think that would be practically? Now, somewhere in your life, you came to the point of interacting with Jesus by the Holy Spirit and making him Lord in your life. That was your response to his revelation to you. Somehow, and it happened differently probably to each one of us, but somehow he revealed himself and we responded. And so we have been making him. I was just saying to somebody the other day, it's hard to believe, but I am approaching my Jubilee year in Jesus. So I got thinking about that. That might be important. I don't know what that means. Maybe I'll just go up and stay in Jerusalem that year or something. Maybe that's what that means. I don't know. Anyway, whatever the case, you have voluntarily made Jesus Lord in your life. All right? But at his coming, every knee will bow, every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord to the glory of God. So it doesn't sound that's totally voluntary. Yeah, but
To me, that kind of sounds almost like, I don't mean to be sacrilegious, but almost sounds like critters have instinct. They know right from wrong automatically. They don't have to read a law. We do. But when Jesus comes, our heart is going to be changed. We won't need to read the law. It's going to be written in our heart.
Okay.
It'll be similar to instinct.
Okay. But that that would technically be applicable to a believer. Now, maybe it's more expansive because, again, we don't know. Yeah, well, yeah. Well, now, in the book of Revelation, Jesus says that he will rule with a rod of iron.
Yeah, he's going to rule.
If they don't come up and worship him, then there's no rain over it.
There's no rain if they don't go to celebrate Sukkot. So there has to be must be some sense of jerking you around a little bit. So, and we don't know that, and it's almost impossible to imagine exactly how it might work. But
The rest of the whole humankind to adjust to and get used to the idea that Jesus really is. It may take some time.
yeah, I would imagine it'd take a little while. Yeah. When I went in the Navy in the boot camp, it took a little time. I got the idea, but pretty soon I got the idea.
Rebellion doesn't come until the end of his 1,000 years.
Okay, all right. So, but that's another issue, and it's out there. But now, let's think about one other thing: human self-determination. Now, in our society, our freedom for self-determination is sort of paramount. We consider in the American mindset. Is that true?
I think so.
I can do what I want to do, go where I want to go, whatever. Okay. Now, voluntarily made Jesus Lord, so he dominates in that sense. But nevertheless, I have the freedom to come and go. I believe that the rebellion in mankind, to a large degree, the rebellion in mankind is a function of the deception of mankind in general under satanic deception, manipulation and deception. Satan always makes sin looks pretty good. And he never associates death with it. Now the Bible plainly, clearly, repeatedly says the wages of sin is, in other words, if you play around with sin, you're going to experience death in one form or another. Ultimately, I'm not even talking about the ultimate separation, but most of us played with that concept a little bit earlier in life, and we kept getting our hands burned, and eventually we figured out that's don't touch hot stoves. It's not a good thing, you know. But that's true. But we learned that. And now, how many of you ever just you had a day off, you didn't have anything much to do, and you went down to Baldwin Fairchild and just hung out at the funeral home? You didn't do that?
No.
Why?
I'm going to be there soon enough.
Okay, but why didn't you go down there?
It's no fun. There's nobody to talk to.
Nobody to talk to. Okay. Well, that's true. They don't talk back. That's right. But the fact is, we don't like death. We don't. Now we go to the funeral home when we have to go to the funeral home. Otherwise, we don't, because we don't like death. But we are deceived into activities that are tied directly to death, and so we like the activities, but we don't like the death. And so the deception, satanic deception, coloring man's self-determination. Now, I believe self-determination is God's design, but without satanic and corruption. And so I believe that when Jesus reigns, the light, truth, reality, the light and it says Satan is going to be chained for that 1,000 years, that he loosed, as you were alluding to. But in that period, he's chained, no deception. Truth and light, reality is right before us. No deception.
You can't blame it on Satan.
And yeah, Satan didn't make me do it. That's right. I've forgotten the guy that used to say that, but whatever. Anyway, no deception. The reality of sin and death will, I believe, be tied tightly together, where it's evident. So when you know that you're choosing sin, you will know that you're choosing death alongside of it. One relationship. I think that's part of the aspects when Jesus reigns. All right, so it says the government's going to rest on his shoulders. So I expect that there will be a world government, and Jesus will be head of it. So how do you suppose it'll be implemented in Castleberry? I guess he'll have a representative delegation here or something. Sent. Now, who will make up that delegation, you think?
Whoever he chooses.
Who?
Whoever he chooses.
Okay, who do you think he might choose?
Somebody else, some believing church, maybe. People
Maybe.
from the believing church.
There is one scripture in the Bible that always been a mystery to me, and it's Micah chapter 5. You'll have to look at this. I don't want to take the time. We're supposed to be reviewing. I will get chewed out if I don't cover this review. Actually, the death is not going to happen for a couple of weeks, but because I'm not going to tell them. See, so and I'm leaving town. So. Guys, what were we talking about? Micah 5. Micah 5. The first part of Micah 5 is about the Messiah being born in Bethlehem. But later on, it sounds like there is a dispersion of the Jewish people in power. Now, the experience of the Jewish people in the dispersion has been, it's a sorry story. It hasn't been power. And the whole Israeli mentality has been changed over the past 50 or so years from a people that's always beaten down and hiding under the rock or something to a pretty bold group of souls saying, "Hey, we're here, deal with it." And so I'm not advocating that this is the only interpretation, but it almost sounds like Israel is dispersed in power from that scripture. And so you'll have to look at that and think about it. Okay, so this is the breakdown, my breakdown, the way I look at this overall thing. So this period of judges and kings, God is in the process of revealing the nature of his government, how he desires to conduct government, and we see this principally in the period of the judges. Now, Israel rejects that for the most part, and they demand to have a world-type government, a king, and so that's what we're coming into in the next course, how that works. And so God said to Samuel, they didn't reject you, they rejected me. And so this period of Judges is probably maybe the clearest picture of the New Kingdom Age that we have. Because God was king in Israel during this era. Now, obviously, you've been studying through it, so, the Israeli experience was pretty much a yo-yo thing. They cycled over and over again, and it's a pretty sorry account. But if you look at church history, that's a pretty sorry account too. So that's a human account, is what it really is. It's not just a sorry Israeli account. it's a human account, because the church has certainly done no better. And if we had an honest appraisal of Fellowship Church now over 50 years, we probably wouldn't be that hot either. We're pretty hot in our own eyes, but they were too, I guess. So we'll see how that works. Okay, I beat that enough. We're going to do something else. I'll flip my board. Tricky, isn't it? Yeah, I know, but this is more fun. You got this on camera, I take it. Good. I like for them to know that I'm right up to speed in all the modern activities. All right. So I did. Let me see if I can find my do-witcher. See if this works. No. Oh, I turned it on, don't I? Let me try out my picture. All right. So, oops, it did work. Let me back it up. Okay. All right. So some of the things I want to review. You've all studied Judges chapter 2. All right. Judges chapter 2 is a spiritual interpretation of the entire 400 years, basically. Now, when I say 400 years, it's round numbers. I think it's actually 352 maybe, or something like that. And the actual dates are disputed. So there's no absolute date. I put 1447 a while ago for the for the period of for the time of the Exodus, and the reason I put it in 1 Kings 6, I believe it is, that it gives us a date that the beginning of the temple, Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, was, I believe, is 480 years since the Exodus, and most scholars would believe that that was started around 970 BC or something like that in Solomon's reign. So, but those dates are all iffy also. So it is a little questionable. Is that 1 Kings chapter 6?
Yeah, it is. It's written 480.
480 a year from what? From the Exodus?
After the children of Israel had come out.
Okay. So that's the only date that we really have, and and Solomon is beginning the temple, I think, at that point in time. But the absolute date when he began the temple, or even his reign, is open for question. There's different scholars comes up with different dates. If you go back 3,000 years. Dates are plus or minus maybe 50 years. It's iffy. By the time we get down to the exile of Israel, 586 BC, it's tightening up considerably. Okay, so let's talk about this cycle of that the spiritual interpretation for the whole period of the Judges. And all of us that have children have seen our kids go through this to some degree or another, probably. Not everybody has, but most of us did. And maybe not quite to this degree, but it's the same process. How many of us, when we were 18, were a little skeptical that Dad and Mom really had much sense?
Oh, my mom and dad didn't have any sense at all. In my eyes, they didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't long before I discovered how smart
Well,
they were.
all right. So later on, you kind of come to appreciate them a little more, but they seemed pretty, kind of out of it. They didn't really know what was happening. So maybe they did. Anyway, a new generation would arise in Israel. I just gave the references. I don't want to read them for time's sake, but a new generation would arise that did. You know the word Yodah? It's a verb, Yadah. It means to know. And know by experience, experiential knowledge. To know. I've got that part where nobody can see it. To know. So a new generation would arise that did not know God experientially. They probably had intellectual knowledge, obviously, of who God was or what He was expecting, but they hadn't experienced Him. And there was multitudes of temptations. And we're going to look at that also in a little while. Multitude of temptations for these, especially the young folks. That's well, okay. So I mean, when you get my age, you can't move around fast enough to get in too much stuff. So.
It's kind of hard to catch up with it.
That's right. So, nobody spends 2/3 of the night drinking and dancing, do you? Gosh, you'd break yourself up. So, no carousing going on here. Okay, so these guys, the new generation that did not know God, would fall into the temptations of idolatry. Idolatry always looks good, and it feels good, and everything about it just is attractive. Like I say, we love the sin, we don't like the death that's associated with it. But the sin portion of it looks really attractive, always. And so these guys would fall into idolatry, breaking Torah, and God becomes irritated and He backs away from them. In Romans chapter 1, the wrath of God is that God withdraws from you, just leaves you on your own. All right, champ, you bought it now, live with it.
And all of a sudden, He's not there anymore.
And He's backed away.
Yeah, He's gone.
He has, in Romans 1, Paul talks about them, turn them over. And that's a scary thing, when God turns you over. That's true. All right, so God withdraws their protection, and they would fall into bondage. Now, one of the fundamental realities about Israel, and the same is true of us, because we are Israelis. I mean, we don't necessarily think of ourselves that way. I think that was Mr. Dorset was kind of addressing it yesterday. But the truth of the matter is, from God's standpoint, you're Jewish. You're Israelis.
You've been grafted in.
You're grafted into the rich olive tree. From His perspective, you're Jewish. If you're following the Jewish king, you're sort of Jewish. So years ago, I came to the confession that my land is Israel, my city is Jerusalem, and my people are the Jewish people. It's just that's who I am. Now, I wasn't born that way, but that's who I am. Okay, so anyway, the reality of Israel is that from its inception, it has always been surrounded by much, much larger nations with much greater capacity, war, economics, in any measure you want to look at. And so Israel always has to depend on God for its existence, for its survival. Now, so if God backs away from you, you're in deep doo-doo. You're in trouble. You're in trouble. And that's what happens throughout this period of the Judges. Every time God backs away, somebody's standing there ready to jump in and put them in bondage. And so it happens. And so they're in bondage. And they're in bondage for 10 years, 18 years, however many years. Now, what happens when you're in bondage? Well, you don't like much. We don't care much for bondage much. It's like the death thing. We don't like it, and so we say crying out for help. And so our prayers get really serious now because we're in trouble. And so if we get, what happens, no matter, if you get really sick, a doctor says you got cancer, you start getting pretty serious about praying, don't you? I mean, it's just the way we are. All right, so Israel begins to cry out. Eventually, God hears and he anoints a leader, a judge, to come up, and a military leader, and he will give them victory over the oppressors. In the case you studied about Gideon, he had a rather large army. God said, that's too many. You're allowed to take the glory for it yourself. So therefore, cut it down, and he went down to 300 men, and then God gave him the victory. But God raised up and anointed a judge, and there resulted deliverance. Now, that generation that went through those steps, now Yah-weh. They know God. They've been there and done it. They've experienced it. And so they live out that generation, and they're Torah people. They're committed to Torah. They live a biblical lifestyle. They don't tolerate stuff because they know where stuff leads you. And so, but eventually the old dudes die off and a new generation pops up, and we go through the same cycle again. And so the whole period of the Judges, 352, whatever the years are, the whole period is cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle of that same pattern. And so Judges 2 then gives us a spiritual understanding of the period. Okay, any questions or comments on that? We'll go on to something else. From Joshua to what? These cycles? Well, it happened immediately after Joshua. The next generation cycled right into it. Yeah. Yeah, because people, yeah. Again, when you're 18, my brother likes to say you feel like you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And so, you can do stuff. What? That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they should have made me a member of Congress. I could have helped my own right in there with some of those guys in there today. Okay. So it happened immediately. There generation after pardon. Well, it depends on how you count the generations. I think typically it's 40. But whatever, there's conflicts in whether you count 40 or 100, so I don't know. So, okay. All right, what else we want to talk about? Let's see what I can do here. That's not right. Let's try that one. Oops, the wrong way. Go that way. Okay, let's talk about the world powers at the time of the Judges. The two dominant world powers at the time of the Judges was Egypt in the south. So on flip sides of Israel. On the south is Egypt. And on the north, in what is now Turkey, was the Hittite kingdom. And the Hittite kingdom was a very powerful kingdom to the north of them. They were the first to develop, they did early ironwork. And they developed the war chariot, and so they were a pretty awesome force. And so now to the east in Mesopotamia you had Assyria and Babylon, but these powers during the period of the Judges they didn't have much of a foreign outreach as such. So they really don't play much of an issue. Every now and then you have Mesopotamian kings coming into the land, but it really doesn't. They actually even happened during the days of Abraham. You remember they took Lot and took off with them, and Abraham built a little army and went after him, rescued him, whatever. But basically, the folks over in Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, the ancient area of civilization, didn't participate much in didn't influence Israel much during the period of the Judges. Now, during the Kings that we're getting ready for, they were a dominant force. So I'll go to that next one. So you see the green area here. I don't know how well that shows up. And if you go down and pick up the Nile, this is then the so-called Fertile Crescent. And this is dominant for the whole period that we're talking about. Europeans during this era are still chasing rabbits with sticks. They're tribal groups. They hadn't become recognizable nations per se. China probably was developed, but China is isolated by the Pacific or the Gobi Desert or the Himalayas, and so China developed pretty much isolated from everything that's happening here. The first European encounters into China was 1080 or so, whatever. What's it, Marco Polo, was that his name? European made it into China, opened up trade routes and whatever. So China is isolated, Europe is undeveloped, Africa is basically tribal states. Some early civilization was developed in Egypt. Anyway, but this is the area that, biblically speaking, that we're really concerned about. So the main power is Egypt here and the Hittites here. And Egypt and the Hittites clashed, and the borderline between them was somewhere in Lebanon, and they pushed it back and forth and warred throughout this period. And so they were a nuisance to Israel, but the international travel was right up the coast. If you've been to Tel Aviv, Yafo, Tel Aviv, that the international travel was right along that path. And the Israelis were living up in the mountains, so they just saw them going by and coming back, whatever. The armies marched back and forth and didn't have that much of an influence. But during this era, everybody knew that from Israel's standpoint, that Egypt was the real dominant power in the thing. And by the way, during the invasion, the conquest of the land, when Israel came into the land, the leaders of various city-states in Israel wrote to Egypt asking for help. We have that in the El Armana letters, I think they're called. Is that what they're called? Somebody help me? El Armana? Nobody ever heard of those? Oh. Well, I'm sure I pronounced it right then. in case you hadn't heard of it. There are letters written. They were found. These letters were found in the ruins of Akhenaten's palaces and so on. And so that again, to me, confirms that the father of Akhenaten was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. Akhenaten saw his older brother die on the night of the Passover, and so he became a singular monotheist in all of Egyptian history, Akhenaten. And during his reign, there were letters, the so-called Tel Armana. I'm sorry, that's what they're referring. Tel Armana letters. Requests from the chieftains from the city-states in Israel, requesting Egyptian help. The Egyptian says, we don't think we want to mess with the Israelis. So no help came. The Iberu were coming into the land and challenged it. Now, scholars never get this. It's amazing. To me, this picture is so clear from what has been recovered that it's just awesome. It's awesome. That there's a singular monotheist, Akhenaten. Yeah, y'all have heard of Akhenaten. You spent any time Akhenaten? He's a strange guy, but he was a monotheist. Now, you know what scholars do with Akhenaten is they say this guy was very unusual. We think that Moses got the idea of monotheism from Akhenaten. So I think Akhenaten got the idea from seeing Moses, what happened with Moses. So anyway, so those are the dominant powers. I've said enough about that. There were obviously local stuff. There are various ites all over the place. The Canaanites, the Philistines, the Philistines now have become you know that the Philistine and Palestinian is exactly the same word, and if you hear it pronounced in Arabic, it is Philistine. Many years ago, 1993, that's a while. I think it was 93. Mr. Arafat, Mr. Rabin, Mr. Perez, Mr. Clinton on the White House lawn signing agreements, and Arafat gave a speech in Arabic, of course, and I could hear Philistine because that's Philistine. Now it's ethnically not related, but they're claiming the position of the so-called Philistines. Okay, so there were all kinds of local enemies that Israel had to contend with during the period. Okay, all right, let's talk. What else we want to talk about here? Let me see what else. I keep pushing the wrong button. Am I going backwards? Okay. Let me go down. Let me come back to that. I got some nice pictures. Now, you guys, did you have doing map work in here? You haven't been doing map work? Oh. I got something to fuss at now. Okay. I like to do map work. So if you haven't seen this before, we'll work on it a little bit. I'd always lose. I need chalk on a string. Here it is. So Israel crossed the Jordan River. They set up a base camp. At Gilgal. In the proximity of Jericho. Jericho obviously was a major threat. So however you locate Gilgal, it has to be near Jericho because Jericho was the dominant threat to the base camp. So after Gilgal, they went up to Bethel and Ai. And they eventually prevailed there and established a foothold in the highlands. Most of you have been to Bethel or in that area, Shiloh, Bethel. You're on a ridge, drops off 1,300 feet to the Dead Sea or the Jordan Valley area. On the opposite side, drops off however many feet to the Mediterranean. I don't know. So they climbed the mountain. There is a natural pass from Jericho up through the mountains to come to Bethel and Ai. So that's how they did it. And then once they had a foothold in the highlands, once they'd done that, then they had what I call the Southern Campaign. and then the northern campaign. This was Amorite, and this was Canaanite. And so we used to do a little map exercise. Whoops, what happened to that? Did I do that? Oh, I didn't know I told it to do that. Okay. So, now, you know the story how they had the battle at Ai. There was a problem there initially because of sin in the camp. Achan, whatever his name was, had taken some goodies in from Jericho. That was settled. Then they went back and they defeated Ai, so they have the base camp is in the Jordan Valley near Jericho, and now they have a base camp established, stronghold in the mountains, on the peak of the mountains. So they're funneling manpower, whatever they need to the base camp, from the base camp to the highlands. Now they made the unfortunate covenant with the people of Gibeon, and that was a sin. They were judged because of that. But anyway, they had a mutual defense thing, and so they had to defend them, and so they had to defend them against a confederation of Amorite cities, and those cities were Jerusalem, Hebron, I've got them on my map if I can see them. I can't tell, it's too small. Ooh, hurt my eyes. Anybody got the names of them? Jarmuth was one, Ekron, Gath, I think, whatever. There were 5 Amorite cities. Now, all of these 5 cities, here is Jerusalem, here is Hebron, Ekron, and the other cities, Lachish, whatever. All of these send troops in here to Gibeon. They know this Canaanite group at Gibeon has made a deal, a contract or a pact with the Israelis, and so they say we're going to wipe them out. And so a Confederation army shows up at Gibeon, that'd be just north of Jerusalem. Now the Israelis marched from their base camp in Gilgal, down near Jericho, up the mountain, and they had whatever their weaponry were, whatever food, whatever they were carrying, so they had to be carrying significant packs with them, up the mountains, and early morning met the Amorite Confederation at Gibeon, and God gave them victory. And they chased them over the mountainside by the Beit Horon, the descent of Beit Horon, of the house of Horon, the descent. There's a natural pass running over the mountains down into the Shephelah, the coastal plain, near what would be today Ben Gurion Airport at Tel Aviv. All right, so they utterly defeated them, and they went city by city destroying them. They did it all, I think, except Jerusalem maybe. So now this was a Confederation army that was repelling the Israelis, standing in the way of the Israelis from settling the land. As long as this Confederation army was intact, then Israel could not move in and settle the land, claim the land. Now God said, this is your land, but what? You got to take it. you're going to have to take it away from these ornery devils that are there now. And that seems kind of, yeah, it would have been nicer if God just wiped them all out and gave them a clean slate and just walk in, here it is, boy. But that's, Jesus said the violent take the kingdom of God by force, and I think he was talking something like that. Moving in the kingdom of God is never easy, and it requires a lot of effort on your part to get there. All right, and so it did with the Israelis. So they destroyed the Canaanite Federation Army. Now there's still Canaanites all over the place, but this Confederation Army is destroyed, and so the standing army is destroyed. So therefore, the Israelis can start moving into their inheritance and literally taking their inheritance, which they had to do. All right, and then once that was accomplished, then there was another Confederation Army of the north, centered around Hatzor. Hatzor is 15 miles north of the Sea of Galilee, something like that. I'm giving real round numbers, something of that nature. A few miles north of the Sea of Galilee, and there were a number of city-states had joined together, made a confederation army here also of the north, a Canaanite confederation, and they included Hatzor, Meron, Achshaphat, and a couple of the cities that I don't remember and I can't see on the thing, it's too small. So they all came together at I believe they say the waters of Meron is here. And so this confederation army was located here. Joshua brought an army, the Israeli army, along the Jordan Valley, up around the Sea of Galilee, and he attacked them and destroyed them, and chased them into Lebanon. Remnants of it fled into Lebanon. And so with their destruction, the confederation armies that dominated the land of Israel was destroyed. And so now, at this point, they could literally divide the land up. That means they would assign each tribe a particular geographical area. That tribe then had to go in and literally house to house occupy the land. They literally took it away from the people that are there, the ancient Canaanites. That wasn't fair, was it? Why did God do a thing like that? Well, they were being judged. They were being judged. We'll talk about them in a minute. We'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll talk about the Canaanites and why they were being judged. They were doing a lot of the same things that America is doing today. Very, very, almost the same stuff. I don't know. Wonder if that means anything. So, all right. So anyway, once the Confederation armies are wiped out, destroyed, then Israel can allocate the land, which they do. Each tribe then goes into its designated area and goes house to house and possesses their land. Now, some of the tribes never was very effective in that. Dan, for example, we'll see, Dan had the region that we know today would be Yah-weh and Tel Aviv area. And that was right down in the front door of the Philistines, just south of there. That was the Philistine coast. And so Dan was never really able to establish his area there. And so they moved, they just said, hey, we're going to grab another piece of land. So they headed north. And most of you have been to Kiryat Shemona and Metula, that area in the north. There is a Tel Dan. If you visit the ancient archaeological site of Tel Dan, up near Caesarea. Jesus at one point was at Caesarea Philippi. He said, who do men say that I am? And you remember the account. That's at Caesarea Philippi, which is right at Tel Dan. So the tribe of Dan finally just kind of say, hey, it's too much competition down here. We're moving, which they did. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll finish this up. I'm supposed to get in History 2 tonight. I'm going to be in trouble.
How many years was it? As 20 and older. Well, they were responsible. So when I started getting everybody, obviously, actually, it was not, generation G and generation D, all You think about what was happening in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, and that generation of people are the leaders of today.
Who was the president? I know that Kennedy was, and then Johnson. Who was after that?
Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Reagan,
Nixon was
Bush.
That story about Nixon's phenomenal, about the 73 Yom Kippur War. You remember that story, right? About how he was called in the middle of the night by the lady prime minister, I think it was, of Israel, to want help, and then woke him up in the middle of the night, and he remembered his mom said, Nixon remembered his mom said you were going to help Israel one day. Yeah, that's pretty profound.
Well, he came out, it's good. And they're trying to do the same thing now. Trump is Yom Kippur War, 73. And then the next thing well, a little bit later, but yeah, he got. Nixon was not really in the well, he was threatened and he resigned. If he had not resigned, he probably would have been. He resigned because of the threat. He got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. All right, I'm waiting for the new Trump. Even the guy just on his side, taking and recording what he's saying. Yeah, that's why you need to rehearse. Sure. All right, everybody. I had one of the sweetest bagels I ever ate. Gosh, I didn't know they made bagels so good.
That were good, they're sweet.
Love the sweet bagels. I think you're going to catch on. Pretty soon you'll see sweet bagel shops all over the place.
Yeah. Otherwise, they call them donuts.
Oh, is that it?
Well, let's do it.
I wouldn't eat a donut. No, far be it from me to eat a donut.
Go. How's that? Okay. Once the coalition armies, Confederation armies were destroyed, Israel was in a position. Now, by the way, if you look at the book of Joshua, probably about chapter 12, but I'm not sure of that. Somewhere along that line, you get the best view of dates for this thing. I think these two campaigns that we're talking about went on for about 7 years, but that's just a real rough guess based on, I think it's Joshua 12 that gives a little guidelines. Talks about Joshua and Caleb. You remember Joshua and Caleb were the two people from coming out of Egypt that actually came into the land of that generation. Now, new generation. Everybody from, I think, 20 years and younger at Kadesh when the rebellion, everyone that young was able to come on into the land. But if you're older than that, you died in the process. Died off before you got there. By the way, that's something. It's I don't have a answer for it, but it's intriguing. According to what I can determine from the scriptures, no one under Moses' authority, under his administration as leader of Israel, he was a judge. He would have been the first little judge of Israel. No one, while under his judgeship, was ever circumcised. Now, you know the covenant that God made with Abraham, that was a specific, if you're not circumcised, you be cut off from your people. So it's not a trivial issue, but no one evidently was ever circumcised under Moses', even Moses' son. Who circumcised his son? His wife, Zipporah, did. And so I don't know right off the top of my head, but probably his dad, Amram. No. Who wasn't circumcised? No, Moses was circumcised. Moses. That's how they knew he was a Hebrew baby, when they got him in the little basket. He would have been circumcised at 8 days, like according to the covenant. They were trying to kill the male babies, and so that's why his mother put him in the basket and whatever. So, but no one now. So the whole crowd that came out of Egypt, anybody who was born after the Exodus was not circumcised. And so when they crossed the river into the Jordan, the first thing they did was everybody was circumcised. So I have no idea why. It's just interesting. So the first thing they did across the river, did that, and then they celebrated what? It was March. I'll give you a hint. they celebrated Passover. So they renewed the covenant with Abraham and the covenant of Sinai, both of them, as soon as they entered the land. And the other thing they did is they went out, there was a wheat field out there, and they gathered some wheat in and made some bread with it, and what happened? The manna cut off. And these guys have been screwing around, arguing, fussing, complaining for 40 years, and God's been feeding them. Finally, they obedient, cross the river, start taking the land, and the first thing God does is cuts off their free bread. Does that make sense?
Well, they got to make their own money, because they
Yeah. Well, he wants you to be a little independent, I guess. What do you think?
want you to earn your living.
He provided means for you, and so you do it yourself. So.
Well, they couldn't do it for themselves, he did it for them.
Okay, let's talk about the allocation of land. Everybody can see the little mini map that I put on the board? Shoot, boy, it's hard to keep up with it. Yeah. I want to talk just for a minute about the allocation of land. Now, who was it? Orville? Who is it? Orwell. That I'd never read the book, but he said he wrote something to the effect that all people are created equal, and some people are more equal than others. Something to that effect, I think. I don't know. I'm maybe misquoting him or quoting somebody else. But in the allocation of land, all the tribes were equal. Freudian slip. All the tribes were equal, but some tribes were more equal than others. So here we are now. Here we are at Gilgal. If you can see the map, I don't know, it's a long ways away. And so while they're at Gilgal, basically there's allocation for two tribes, Judah and Joseph. Now Joseph is subdivided into Manasseh and Ephraim, but and so they did everybody a nice favor. We'll just take the heartland. So, this is Judah, and this is Joseph. Okay, now remember, three tribes are over here: Reuben, Gad, and a half tribe of Manasseh. Okay, so half tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim is here, and Manasseh's there. So Joseph. All right. So Simeon took his. Remember, Levi and Simeon got in trouble in Genesis 20:35 or whatever, 34. Whenever they came into the land, they wiped out the city because of their sister Dinah. Dinah had gotten in bed with Shechem, and so that was the Jewish evangelical outreach. They said, well, you guys going to marry our sister, you got to be circumcised. And so they, all right, we'll convert. And so when they couldn't move around, Simeon and Levi went in and whacked them up, killed them all. And so the outreach had a negative impact. So Simeon and Levi was never to receive an inheritance in the land as a result of that. Jacob judged them in that sense. So Simeon did receive, he took his inheritance within Judah. So he's always down here. All right. So now after these guys, after the main land is divided at Gilgal, then we go up here at Shiloh, where eventually the tabernacle is established there. And so all the other tribes says, hey, where's our land? We're supposed to have land too. And so they started dividing the land. So Naphtali I don't know, is that spelled right? Naphtali is up there in the far north. If you've been to Metula in that area, Metula would be in Naphtali. Who are some of the other tribes? Asher is over here on the coast by Haifa today. Who else we got? Zebulun is in the Jordan valley up here. Zebulun. Issachar is here also. Anybody else? Benjamin. Benjamin took his inheritance between Joseph and Judah. Okay. And somebody else? We talked about him a few minutes ago. Dan. Dan took his inheritance opposite Benjamin over here between Judah and Joseph. And now remember, here's Gaza. And who's down here? The Philistines. So Dan's inheritance is right in the front door of the Philistines. So eventually Dan is going to end up here. We left out somebody. Who else? Yeah, well, Ephraim and Manasseh are both in Joseph. Gad. Where's Gad? Gad's over here. Gad and Reuben and the half-tribe of Manasseh is up here in the Golan Heights, whatever. Do we have them all? Remember Levi, he doesn't have an inheritance. And he's going to have cities throughout the land that are going to be assigned to Levi. The Levites were never. There's no area that you travel. Sometime in traveling in Israel today, you'll see signs on road signs that says you're leaving the territory of Judah and entering the territory of Benjamin. Yeah, I see them sometime. They're not everywhere, but I've seen them. They have them up. Okay. There's no territory assigned to Levi because of this incident at Shechem, and so Levi then became the helpers of the priestly tribes, and so they had cities, but they didn't have. They were city dwellers. They could have. They're kind of like my little territory up in Kentucky. We live right on the outskirts of the city, and I've got a farmette. I grow my garden and I do stuff. You know, I got 2 tractors that I drive around. I'm going to drive 1 tractor at a time because the land's not big enough. But and these are small tractors. Okay, did we leave anybody out? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We left. 12. Hey, we got them all. No, we left one out. Somebody's missing up there. I don't know who it is. We missed one. So anyway, that's the basic allocation of land. So once the main territory was divided, then at Shiloh, they give the other people their area assignments, and so each one had to go into their own territory and take it by force. So God gave them the land, but they had to take it by force. And so that should tell us something about the kingdom of God, huh? God made you a Green Beret in his army. But you're going to have to fight every step of the way. And I was pastor here for about 35 years, and believe me, we fought every step of the way. And,
I always appreciate it when you had to fight for.
That's right. It was not a freebie. Not a freebie. Okay. Any question about allocation? Okay. Let's go into something else. I'm going to spend the whole night screwing around with this, but that's all right. I'll tell the pastor that you guys helped me up. Betty Jean did it. That's right. I would have got along much faster, but Betty Jean helped me up. Okay, let's talk about. I have some slides here. I want to get back to. Where did I do with my do-witcher? Here it is. I'm going to back up now. Now, we asked the question again, why did God, here's these poor Palestinians just mind their own business, and God just moves some cutthroat Israelis in saying, it's yours, go in there and whip them, kill them off, and take it yourself. Why did God do that? And that doesn't seem very fair, does it? From the way we judge things. Well, part of the problem. Remember, God said to Abraham, something to the effect of the sin of the Amorite is not fulfilled or not completed or something. So however he said it, In other words, God already had his eyes on what was going on. Now, the Canaanite culture was very well developed in that day. There were city-states throughout the land. Now remember, Egypt is the big daddy, but there's city-states with little kings all through the land. And they were highly developed culturally and every other sense. The cities, they had commerce, they had artisans, they had everything. They were city-states. They were workable governments. They were functional. They had their own police. They had everything. Markets, well-established homes. So it was well developed. Now the Israelis, on the other hand, they had been in bondage in Egypt for how long? A long time. And then they'd come out and they'd live in the desert for a whole generation just getting there. So what kind of situation were they in the desert? How did they live there? All right, so God sustained them supernaturally. What kind of houses did they have there? So they're probably living in some sort of tents. Anybody ever see a Bedouin village in Israel today? I would suspect it would be maybe something similar to what we see the Bedouins. Probably not quite that elaborate. And most of the times I see a Bedouin village today, it's got a TV antenna sticking up through the tent, so I doubt that they had CNN in Moses' day. But anyway, they probably were basically tent dwellers, and by the time they came into the land, they probably were living in tents or caves or anywhere where they could. So they would have been extremely primitive from the standpoint of they were in the early bronze stage of development. They were from Stone Age to early Bronze Age. Remember, when they crossed the Jordan and everybody was circumcised, they used flints. So that would be Stone Age type equipment that they were dealing with. So by the way, usually the Canaanites had much better weaponry than the Israelis did. So anyway, part of the thing with judgment of the Canaanites was their system of gods. They served a host of gods, and this is, you can't really see it much, but this is Baal with a thunderbolt in his hand. He's the god of war, and he's the chief god, Baal. Now, Baal in Hebrew just means master, but so it'd be equivalent to our uses of Lord for Jesus. Lord, master, Baal. Ha-Baal, the master, Ha-Baal. So he is the dominant God. He is the son of El, El is a more primitive Semitic god. But El is off the picture by this point in time, and Baal has succeeded him. And Baal has a... oh, by the way, this is the altar of Baal that has been uncovered at Megiddo. Some of you have seen this at one point or another, on the mountain of Megiddo. You see the steps leading up to where they present offerings to Baal here. This is the altar of Baal. All right, then you had Asherah. Astarte or Asherah. Asherah was the goddess of war and of sexuality, reproduction, whatever. And you can see there maybe a little emphasis there on ladies' features or whatever that they have in their little idols. These are real idols that have been archaeologically recovered, whatever. So now there was something about the Asherahs that in the high places and that was associated with trees, and I never have been able to find out what they were. I don't know if there were carvings on the trees or in the trees, or maybe they carved figurines out of trees themselves. I don't simply know. But this, all right, and then what else we have? Oh, let me back up one other. And so the dominant god would have been Baal and Asherah and Molech. And Baal and Asherah, you would entice them to receive a blessing. Molech, you would appease them. And the manner of appeasement typically was the offering of a young child, month-old, year-old, something like that, a child. And they were burned to appease Molech. And so they built a stone hearth with extended arms and a white hot fire under it, and they would just lay a baby in those arms and roll down and be devoured, and they would appease Molech. So now, in the case of Baal and Asherah, there were temple prostitutes. The way of worship would have been through what we would call prostitution. So they had both male and female prostitutes. So that's how you would worship. So the worship of Baal and Asherah would effectively be adultery, fornication, adultery. That's always positive for family structure, as you might guess. So practices like this is the reason that we believe that there was such judgment on this community that God was wiping them out and giving the land to Israel. Now, with that in mind, I want us to think for a moment. Now, here is a model of the Canaanite city of Lachish. So you see a walled city, well-established houses, commercial areas. This is probably a commercial area, temple areas all in there. So it's a well-established city. Now, this is a Bedouin camp. Now, this would have been probably what the Israeli looked like. How did I do that? Did I turn it off? I didn't touch anything. It just decided. What did it do? But this is not supposed to control the projector. I bet it got hot or something. Are you coming back, buddy? Maybe I'll come back. We'll talk about it. So we saw the Bedouin, perhaps the Israeli thing, the well-developed Canaanite. Now, think about the gods. These gods, they had concrete idols, not made out of concrete, but real hewn, molded figurines like the Asherah that we saw, or some sort of stone thing of Baal, whatever. They had real concrete images of their gods. How about the Israeli picture of God? Is he coming back? Maybe. How about the Israeli picture of God? What do they have? Nothing. And in fact, expressly prohibited. Lo ta'aseh lacha pesel, biko timuna asher b'shamayim v'ma'el v'ba'aretz mitahat b'mayim mitahat ha'aretz. Second commandment. You shall not make idols of anything in heaven, on earth, or in the water, under the earth, whatever. All right. So they had no representation of God at all, and strictly prohibited. I hate to push the button because I don't know what it's doing.
Somewhere in the Prophets it says, it says, don't call me Baal. Remember that?
No. I mean, I didn't mean it. Just because I don't remember that.
God is saying that. Would he be saying that don't call
Power off.
other gods but me?
Press any other button. How about that? We know it's prohibited. So the Canaanite had express objects that they dealt with that portrayed their God. The Israeli had nothing. Purely intellectual, spiritual encounter. All right? Prohibited. Now, they lived in tents like that, perhaps, and they go into a city like Lachish. The Israelis were the first generation out of slavery. What does that do to you? You've been a few hundred years in slavery. What does it do to you? I mean, most of us don't really know that, do we? Because we've never been there.
I would assume very low esteem.
Very low esteem. I mean, lower than whale dung, as they say in the Navy.
Didn't think much of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Now.
They don't know what to do with themselves, really. Now that they're free, they make all their choices. They don't know how to live.
Well, they probably they don't have it, but they have no concept of virtually no concept of community, no self-esteem, no confidence, no cultural confidence whatsoever. Now, we might be able to think about that in some terms in the black communities in this country over the past couple of hundred years, or 150 years, I guess, whatever, since the Civil War. I think something like that has taken place. Probably, I don't know. I'm not a part of that, so I don't know. I will share this one thought, and this happened years ago. I was coming out here one evening for a class like this, and I left the house, and it was daylight. So, it's a little bit later in the year, I guess, than this. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There was a drugstore up in Castleberry that I had to stop and go in and get something. And so I parked. I was in a hurry, ran up to the door, and just as I was approaching the door, there was a black lady coming out the door. And the door opened, and for a moment we were just standing face to face. And I saw fear in her eyes. And I said, gosh, that's strange. Because I wasn't afraid. And now, so what I saw, what I believe I saw, was I am, as a white person, I am perfectly comfortable in my turf, on my turf. This is my turf. In her eyes, she was on my turf. It wasn't her turf, it was my turf. Now, she has as much claim to that door as I did, and I don't even remember. I waited for her to exit or whatever. It doesn't matter how that worked. It's just that instant that you came face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and I saw something in her that was, I say, how could that? I don't understand this. But I saw fear in her eyes. She was terribly uncomfortable because she felt like she was on my turf. It was my turf, not hers. I think that's a remnant of what we're talking about, something like that. I'm confident that the Israelis had it deep set within them in this period. Now, Moses, we read about Moses. Moses dealt with it. He was okay. Joshua was confident. But we're talking about the 18-year-old young man or young woman that has grown up without any self-confidence in a culturally, what's the word I want to a suppressed or almost undeveloped cultural sense. No community structure, hardly any community structure whatsoever. And then they go into a town like I would like to project, but not everybody is trying to cooperate. Let me push the button again. Push. I push another button, stupid. Look at you. Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot, Miss Chris. I appreciate it. Okay, we got pictures. Look at this. Let me hurriedly speed through the pictures and get down to my picture. Now, just a minute. You were 18 at some point. I know I was, but I don't remember when. Anyway, just think when you were 18 and your mindset. How much mom and dad knew at that point relative to you and whatever. You're in a suppressed, in your mentality, an inferior community. You're a part of an inferior community. You're going into a highly developed setting. You live in a cave. These guys live here. These guys have got a multitude of everything, and you don't have anything, hardly anything. Whatever you can. I mean, can you imagine whatever? All right. So now, and your God, you've heard about him. You heard about what he's done in the past. Dad said about it, and the uncle so and so, he talked about it. But you've never seen. You don't know about God or nothing. And you go into the town and you say, hey, these guys they worshiping God. Let's go over and see what they're doing. And so you're a young man, let's say, and you're 18, and you have hormones. And you walk up, and there's this give me some help here, the priestess that's going to help you worship. And she looks like Miley Cyrus. Is that her name? Something like that. Dressed about the same way, perhaps. And she says, come on in the back room and we'll do some worship in here. And you say, well, system it's better than Dad's old system. Yeah, I mean, we're kind of making a joke of this, but can you imagine the pressure on a young person, culturally inferior, walking into such a setting. You don't know God from a hot rock, and you've never seen anything. You've heard stories, but you've never seen or experienced anything yourself. And these prosperous, culturally mature folks, and you go into town, and this is the enticement. And you're 18 years old. What do?
Go for it.
You go for it. You go for it. Of course you do. And they did. And they did. Now, I'm not trying to make an excuse for sin. But hopefully we can help us understand a little something of how this thing kept happening. Because the whole first early kingdom age, this almost 1,000 years, is dominated by this same practice. It'll be dominant throughout the period of the kings also. Now, after the period of the kings, and they get booted out of the land and judged that way, then the Israelis had to rethink idolatry, and they came up pretty hard on idolatry after that point. But okay, so I want you to think about some of these pressures that were that. So this is it's like many years ago. When I worked for Florida Power, I had to go to some sort of meeting in Manhattan, and so I went dutifully up there and went to the meeting. I don't even remember what it was about. But I had a few hours afterward before I had to catch a plane back, and I'm downtown. And what am I doing? I'm a hayseed. I'm looking. Look, I'm a hayseed in New York City. Listen, if I get anywhere east of the Hudson River, I begin to get hives, breaks out. I can't. I'm in a foreign, strange environment. Yeah, but not there. We're not talking about that. Okay. Everybody see what I'm talking about. I want you to think about that because we read through this, and you read through the books of the Bible, and you go pretty quick, and you get these idiots. How did they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again? Well, how did that happen? I think we can understand how it happened. And I think we can see it in our own kids to some degree.
Well, they have to compare it with. Everybody else is living the same lifestyle.
Yeah.
So they have no comparison to judge by.
No. Well, everybody they knew in their families were living in tents or caves or something, bare existence. And these Canaanites were living it up. They had everything. They had nice houses. They had commerce going right and left, and they had gods that you could touch, and even better. I mean, remember, you're not 58, you're 18. Maybe about 50, well, I don't know anymore. People don't get any smarter with age. So, gosh, I remember I took a job out of Purdue in L.A. with Bechtel. Anybody ever hear of Bechtel Corporation? You know who they are? Pardon? Oil. Yeah, oil, petroleum, nuclear. I was working in the nuclear divisions and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, so Joe and I, we come right out of the cornfield in northern Indiana and walk right into L.A. And so Miss Joe said, you don't even have a suit. You're going to work Monday. In those days you wore a suit and tie. As an engineer, you wore a suit and tie to work. You wouldn't show up. So we went to a men's shop. Once, I guess it was a Saturday or something. And the guy that helped me find a suit, he had fingernail polish on? I don't know if he had earrings or what. Makeup and fingernail polish and stuff. And it's strange. I don't know. Where am I? this ain't Kansas anymore, is it? So we knew, I knew we were in, we're in trouble. It was strange. It was strange, and it only went downhill from there in L.A. Yes, ma'am.
Would the presence of the tabernacle just not have any meaning to you?
Well, it would, but how often did they go to the tabernacle? Once a year, or well, maybe 3 times. 3 times typically. And again, think about the tabernacle. I'm glad you brought that up because they did have the tabernacle. But remember now, you're 18 and you're going with your family to the tabernacle. And so the tabernacle, now the priest and the Levites are the only ones that are really dealing with anything in the tabernacle. Everybody else was onlookers, right? And so, but you know, the leaders of the community or whatever, the tribal leaders and so on, they would be front and center in whatever's taking place, wouldn't they? And then the families around that, and you're 18, where's your position in the pecking order? You're way back there somewhere. So yes, they would have been at a tabernacle, but I think that, you know, we're talking about 1 million people or so, or at least around a thing that's like the size of this room. So I think their actual, what they would taken away from that would have been very minimal. So again, not the purpose of looking at this stuff is not to excuse sin, because sin always produces the same fruit every time. It never failed. I have never found a case where it failed. It always produced exactly what it promised every time. And so no excuse for sin, but we can, I think, understand somewhat of what kind of mechanism was ongoing and to explain what we see in this thing. And I think we can personalize it a little better perhaps in our own lives. How many of us as older teenagers basically walked away from church? I did.
Most of us.
Yeah, I did. What I have to do with church? You know, that's old women go to church. That's all that go to church. I don't need. Hey.
Would there have been a slacking off of teaching a lot too, from the parents to the children?
Probably in sometimes. Some were probably faithful in that. Probably some weren't so faithful. I guess that would be typical. I guess. But even the strongest families that raise their kids in the church and teach them and everything, if you're 18, you can. Mom and dad were faithful. They went to church all the time. They took me as long as I would go. And then I got to the point where I didn't. I think I can skip this, and so I skipped it. I don't need this. Okay, you get the picture. So I think we can understand. All right, what else? We want to talk about Ruth. Any question or comments on this stuff? We can understand some of this stuff, I think. All right, the book of Ruth. I've got some. Oops. Okay. To me, the book of Ruth is the first book of prophecy in the Bible. Because it one of your Hebrew words is, I think it's spelt with an aleph, probably pointed like that. Everybody see that? What's that word? Can you see it? Goel. Goel. If you're from Brooklyn, that's a Goel. And you're a boy. but if you're not from Brooklyn, it's Redeemer. It's Redeemer. I used to do that with John Klein. So when I was in boot camp, there was a guy there in boot camp from, I shouldn't tell this, but I will. Come on. I didn't want that on tape. Mr. Diaz. A lot of it comes to Kentucky. He's bigger than I am. I think he's with me. I've been going to the gym, but I still. I went this morning. You couldn't tell. So okay, let's look at it. The book of Ruth is the story of the Goel, the Redeemer. It referred to there as, I think in New American Standard, kinsman, redeemer, but Goel, redeemer. Goel can be, in this case, a noun, but also a verb form, to redeem. To redeem. And so we have a cast of characters in the story. The father figure is called Elimelech, my God is king. Eli, my God, Melech, king. Elimelech. The wife is Naomi, pleasant. Naomi is what's the town at just the north end of the Sea of Galilee? No, just at the sea itself. No, where Peter's mother's. Capernaum. Kafar Nahum. That's a different name. Kafar Nahum. It means a village, a pleasant village. Kafar Nahum. All right, that doesn't have. Naomi is pleasant. All right, Naomi. They leave. They're located at Beit Lechem, the house of bread. They leave that and they go across the Jordan into Moab. And in the experience, Naomi's name is changed to Mara, bitter. Okay? Now, in Moab, Elimelech dies. They have 2 sons, and the 2 sons, their names are Hilion and Mahlon, wasting away and sickly. Now, Johnny Cash didn't like the idea of being named Sue, but sickly and wasting away is even worse. So obviously there's significance and meaning to this. So now Hilion and Mahlon marry Orpah and Ruth. One, I don't know which one marries who, doesn't matter in the story. Orpah means stiff-necked, and Ruth means friend or beautiful friend. Friend. All right, so Hilion and these 2 sons marry Moabite women, Gentile women, while they're in Moab. Now, the father figure, Elimelech, dies. Hilion and Mahlon, they're wasting away sickly, they die. And so Ruth and Orpah are left as widows along with Naomi. And eventually Naomi hears that the famine in the land of Beit Lechem its situation has changed and things are not so bad. So she decides it'd be time to go back to the land. And so she proceeds to do so. Her daughter-in-laws, they decide to go with her. And so she tells them, I'm an old woman. I'm not going to have any more sons. So there's not going to be anyone to marry you guys, or in those days, marriage would have been crucial for surviving. For a woman, it would have been crucial to be married to survive, and so not so much so today, I guess. So whatever. Anyway. anyway, both of them are going with her, and she said, "There's no hope for. I can't provide anything for you." And so Orpah says, "Well, there's not much here. I'll just return to my father's house." And so Orpah turned back. But Ruth said, "I'm going with you, and your God is going to be my God, and your people are going to be my people, and where you die, I will die." So Ruth is an absolute convert. She is utterly committed. Now most of the times that these scriptures are used, they're used in the context of weddings. But this is not really has anything to do with a wedding. It's a commitment, people to people, in that sense. So they return, and now Israel has its own. Israel, biblically speaking, has its own welfare program, and so you had to go out and do it yourself. And it was gleaning, and so they're commanded to leave stuff in the field for gleaners. So if you didn't have a means of support, you could go and glean and at least survive. And it was probably a pretty thin survival, but you could survive. And so Naomi is too old to deal with it, so Ruth goes out to glean. And so she ends up in the field of Boaz. Boaz is the only name in the whole story that seems to have difficulty finding a meaning for. I mean, you can come up with a. Pardon?
Why is he left off the list
Because we'll get to him in a minute. But his name again. If you look, all these names: sickly, wasting away, Mara, all of them have obvious, straightforward meanings. Boaz is not. All right. So anyway, Ruth finds herself in the field with Boaz, in his field, gleaning. She doesn't know whose field it is, and so he comes along and he commands the reapers to, hey, just leave a little extra grain out there, make it easy for her. And so she's out there. She's really doing good, and so she's gleaning. So she comes home and she tells her mother-in-law about the situation, what happened, and so Naomi then, she said, "Oh, you're in the field of our kinsman, our Goel, our kinsman redeemer, Boaz." He must have been like a brother to Elimelech or a close kin. I don't think it makes it absolutely clear who it is. So Naomi says, instructs Ruth now, go to the threshing floor. Now, they would have brought grain in. They didn't have John Deere combines in those days, so they would have brought cut grain and put it to the threshing floor. Oxen would tread upon it. Then they would take a winnowing fork, throw it up in the air. The shaft would blow away, and the grain, purify the grain. And then you'd stay with it at night, because if you left it and you went home for supper, somebody else would have stole it probably. So Boaz was sleeping at the threshing floor because he wasn't finished with the process. And so Naomi tells Ruth what to do. So you are to go to make a petition to this Goel for our redemption. And you're the one that has to do it now. And so Ruth followed the instructions. She put on her Sunday dress, took a shower, put on her Sunday dress, went to the threshing floor. It's already dark now. He's had a little toddy. He's asleep, and she lays down at his feet. And then he wakes up, and well, this is going to be a scandal. Something's going on here. But she said she identifies who she is, and she asked that he intervene as the Goel. Now it's important that the Goel now, that Ruth is the one that's making this petition. It's not Naomi. It's on behalf of Naomi, but it's Ruth that's making the petition. And so he agrees to do so, and so he shows up at the city gate the next day, But there's a nearer kinsman than Boaz. And so he has to have the privilege of redemption if he wants to take that privilege. But he said, oh yeah, I'll redeem Naomi's property, the property of Elimelech. Every family has a field that belongs to them from the original allocation of land. So you can track the lineage back on the piece of land at Bethlehem. And so the nearest kinsman says, well, yeah, I'll redeem that on behalf of Naomi. And so Boaz says, okay, that's good. But when you do, you have to take Ruth also to raise up children for the deceased sons. And the guy said, oh, hey, that complicates everything. I can't do that. And so Boaz says, well, if you can't, I can, and I will. And so he goes through the redemption process, takes Ruth as a wife. They have a child. His name is Obed. Obed is the father of Jesse. Jesse is the father of David. So we immediately linkage now to Jesus. David is the forerunner of Jesus. And so, now, the understanding, Elimelech is Israel led into captivity. Israel driven out of the land, 586 BC, driven into captivity. Their experience in the land, in captivity, has been bitter. Any reading of Jewish history, the Jewish people have been expelled from virtually any country in the world. The lone exception at the moment is the United States, and with Congress going the direction that it is, it's just a matter of time. Just a matter of time. All right. So Ruth, Naomi's experience becomes Mara, a bitterness. Orpah, oh no. I just clicked the stupid button. That's not supposed to do that. I don't know what it's doing. You think it's timing out on me? Okay. I want to suggest that Naomi, Ruth represents us, represent believers committed to Jesus to the point that we are associated with the support for and building up of Jacob, of Israel in the land. Orpah, I believe, is the Gentile church that doesn't know anything about Israel and doesn't want to know anything about Israel. Not associated. Replacement theology. Last night we heard a lady talking about replacement theology and the consequence of it, and it's terrible. I won't talk about it. Doreen said I shouldn't talk about stuff up home. Okay. The nearest kinsman I'm going to suggest is the Mosaic covenant. The Jewish people relate to God through the covenant that God made with Abraham and Moses. So when you're 13 years old as a young Jewish person, you become a bar or bat mitzvah, a son or daughter of the commandments, meaning that you have taken your position as an adult in the company of Israel, relating to God in accordance with the covenant at Sinai. All right. Boaz is Jesus, the Redeemer. He is the Redeemer. The Redeemer. Moab represents the nation of the earth, and Bethlehem, the land of Israel. So, the story is then that Israel was dispersed throughout the earth. over the years, some of us were married into the family, even though we may or may not have realized that we were. We were married into the family. When you started making Jesus Lord, you were married in the family. Now we've lived in the age of the ingathering of the Jewish people to the land. They're there now. We have a group over there right now, sleeping hopefully right now, I guess. But whatever, they're in the land what are they there for? What's their purpose? Why do we put chunks of money in Ma'ale Amos, I think? Is that one of the areas? I haven't been there, so I'm not familiar with. Kedemim, we've put, I don't know, over the years we've put, I'm just going to guess, Jim, you probably have a better feeling. I'm going to say $250,000, 300,000, 400,000 into Kiryat Arba. We've put a similar amount into Kedemim. So we probably, over the years, have put $1 million in the land of Israel, building up the land of Israel. I don't know the exact amount, but it has to be a considerable amount. So, I mean, that's not a big amount of money to a lot of people, but to me personally, it's a lot. So we are gleaning. We're gleaning. Now, the important thing here, though, is not that we're gleaning and helping Naomi to survive in the land. That's important, but the more important part is our role in the redemption process. Remember, it was now. Now, if you're going to plan to write this story, you would have certainly written that Naomi approached Boaz and sought redemption. It only makes sense. She didn't. She sent the one that could do it, and that is Ruth. Ruth went and made petition. Now, who is it that has an audience with the king that is able to make a petition? Who is it? That's us. That's what we confess and are called for. We have an audience with the king. We see exactly the same picture in Esther. Esther could approach the king. Anybody else approach the king? They would have lost their head. Esther was able to do it. It's the same picture. Same picture. And Ruth is in a position to do it. And so hence the picture, I think we have a picture of redemption. Not just a nice pastoral story of love between a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law, which is nice enough. But there's a bigger picture. It is the picture of the Goel, the Redeemer. Question or comment? I mean, to me, the book of Ruth it's so blooming exciting. I get chills just thinking about the implications of it, and where we stand today. Think about it. We are the Ruth. We are the Ruth. We've been given such an incredible position of righteousness. Okay. Do you need me to write the words on the board for your? You've been doing the Hebrew words, Shaphat. You all know that. I like Sar. What was it? Sar tze-vah Adonai. Did you do that one? I like that one. Whoops. Huh. Let me see if I spelt it right. Yep, that should be right. Sar, anybody know? You've heard Sar Shalom? Isaiah chapter 9, or is that 11? Shemo Sar Shalom. Shemo Pele Yoetz El Gabor Aviad Sar Shalom. Prince of Peace. Sar Shalom. Prince. Or captain. In this case, it's military application. Tze-vah is the armed forces. Armed forces. The army. The army. The captain of the army of Yud-He-Vav-He, the Lord. Captain of the host of the Lord. This is the guy that met Joshua on the plains of Jericho. And Joshua fell down and worshiped. He took his shoes off first and fell down and worshiped. I never knew why that was so important, but it must have been. Moses did it. Joshua did it. Sar Shalom. Sar Tze-vah Adonai. You can't see it because it's washed out on that board. Doesn't do good. That's a good word. Baal, we knew Ha-Baal, Ohel, Goel. You got all those words. We don't need to do that. And we're out of time. And I didn't even get into History 1. I promised to do so. So we've reviewed the whole blooming thing. And you don't like to take tests, huh? I thought I'd just give you one tonight. But no, I guess not, if you don't want it. I did bring one. I think I covered most everything. I guess the pastor will give that to you one of these days. I think I covered everything. All right, we reviewed. Questions or comments? You guys, I hope you don't quit normally at 9:30. If you did, I ran way over. Is that when you quit? 10. Okay, well, it's 10 o'clock. The what? Threshing floor.
Yeah, as far as the prophecy, because we know that goes to David. We know that. That's the prophecy. How does that line up with Ruth?
Well, a threshing floor is just simply a large outcropping of flat rock. If you've been in the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount, there's a big threshing floor, and that's what that was. That was, who owned that? The Jebusite that owned that? Ornan, is that his name? Whatever. It was a big flat outcropping of limestone rock. Flat.
I didn't get to see it.
Well, okay. But so let's say you have 3 or 4 of these tables pushed together, big, just basically a flat outcrop. Up in Kentucky, we have all kinds of outcropping of limestone like that, and you've got roughly large areas. I used to, when I was a kid, get in the sun, and when it's in the summertime, and I'd lay down on my back on that flat limestone outcropping of rock, and just kind of bake right in the bright sunlight. It'd warm me right up. I don't know if that had to do anything. Anyway, just a big outcropping of rock. All right. So what they do is you go to the field with wheat. So you got wheats growing this high, and the grain's in the head, and you go in the field. And in those days, you would take a sickle, a blade. It has a handle and a blade, and you would cut the wheat and form a bundle of the wheat. What do they call them? Sheave of wheat. You'd bundle it, tie it together some way, and then you go cut some more, and you just bundle it, and then sooner or later you'd gather all those, put them on a wagon, or probably in those days a sled or some sort, and oxen would pull it to the threshing floor. And so on the threshing floor, you'd scatter the stuff out. Remember, it's a big flat area of rock. It's flat. And you'd take your oxen and have them to just walk around on it. Their heavy, sharp hooves, what does that do to the grain in the heads of the wheat? It just pushes out the grain and separates the grain from the straw, from the oxen just tromping on it. So you wait until, and it's April, May that time of year. It's winter wheat. And so what happens to the wind that time of year? You get a nice breeze blowing. And so they go in with a pitchfork, winnowing fork. It's not exactly a pitchfork like that. And you take that, scoop it up, and throw it up in the air. The wind blows the wheat. Wheat's light, the grain's heavy. So every time you do that, the grain gets more pure grain and the wheat blows off and the chaff blows off. And so pretty soon you have pure grain. You put it in a sack and you take it to your dwelling. So that's what a threshing floor is. Today we have a combine. It's big John Deere. You've seen them. They have a thing up front, does this. So it rolls the wheat inside, a blade cuts it off, rollers roll out the grain from the straw, blows the grain up into a bin, and blows the straw out the back. You drive down the field, you're taking about a 30-foot swath cut through the thing, and you got tractor trailers loading up your grain and taking it to market. So it's mechanized today, but that's how it was done in the old world. I remember the first thresher that came by our area when I was a kid. Anybody know what a threshing? You ever see a threshing machine? No. So it was stationary. You had to bring your sheaves of wheat to it, but basically it pushed the belts and so on that push the head of the grain, push the grain separate from the straw, and separate, and you bag it, and you had your grain. Threshing floor. So it was just, from the standpoint of the Bible, that's just the agricultural process that was going on. David bought the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. Is that the guy's name? Because that's the Temple Mount today. He bought it because God, in the book of Deuteronomy, over and over and over again, God keeps saying, I'm going to establish a specific place in the land when you get there, and you'll worship me at this place. But he never specifies what it is. We don't know what it is until David takes Jerusalem, and it becomes that threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. That's a site, and that's the temple site. That's where Solomon built the first temple. So now the book of Ruth is at Bethlehem, so there would have been threshing. There would have been rocks, places like that all over the place. There wouldn't have been a single one for the whole outfit. So, well, it was worth. I got one of the sweet bagels. That was the best bagel I ever ate, I think. So, hey, it was worth it for the trouble. Next week, I promise, History 2, we're going to do the kings. We're going to do a lot of kings. Try to get as far as we possibly can. I don't want a bad report from the man.